This is the U.S. intelligence agency mind control.
Hassan, Trump.
He's like just as unfunny as Hassan, but he's actually correct.
He's an illegal alien
and,
migrant.
and like not reactionary, you know. So like this guy Hassan, he's evil loner box.
We saw this. Are we watching this? We saw this.
We can go to Mitt Romney.
Another thing that McConnell acknowledged today when he was announcing that he was stepping down is that he's out of step with the majority of the Republican Party. On national
he literally
security.
was like, "Hey, this party's too fascist. I'm leaving." Romney is like, I'm like the only normal guy left at this point. Funny. Look at him. Look at his eyes are all red. Like he's so like beat down. Like that was like the last ally I had. Can you believe it? Mitch McConnell, an ally. That's all I had left.
Fine. What the foreign policy view.
She's my favorite at saying.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that though is like Lebanese are like way more laid back and Turks are always screaming on the internet, you know? They're just fitting those stereotypes perfectly.
Of the Republican Party is today.
I think they're different, avenues of perspective on that. And my own view is that, and I do believe that the majority of our caucus of the Republican senators believes that we should play an active role in the world and that we should defend freedom in places where it's under attack. I think, for instance, if Taiwan were attacked, you'd see the great majority of the Republican senators say we need to help Taiwan. I want to give it weapons so it can defend itself. I believe that if there's a plain vote just to give weapons to Ukraine, the Republican senators will support that. Some were unhappy with support for the government of Ukraine, didn't want to vote for the Ukraine funding on that basis. But I think the majority of our group feels that we are better off in America if we defend the cause of freedom around the world. Otherwise, bad people, terrible authoritarians like Vladimir Putin are going to ultimately attack NATO nations, and we're going to be required by treaty to send our own soldiers
pulls us out of NATO, Mitt.
Or we can walk away from NATO and blow up an alliance which has helped preserve a global peace at least among the major powers for the last 75 or 80 years.
I was just in Ukraine, sitting down with President Zelensky. They are deeply worried that your colleagues in the House, Republicans in the House, aren't going to send them any more aid, that they are going to stand in the way. I mean, what responsibility do you believe Republicans will bear for setbacks on the battlefield for Ukraine if they don't pass aid?
Well, if we don't pass aid for Ukraine, then I think Ukraine has a very difficult time preserving their geographic integrity and life. You're going to have a lot of people who lose their life as Russia
geographic integrity.
And that will make it very clear to people around the world that
they'll get wiped off the map
because we made a commitment in 1994 to respect the sovereignty of
Ukraine.
Oh,
speaking of which, one of those fundraisers at the bottom was funded.
And that's what's happening. If we walk away from that, they won't trust our word. Europe will say, hey, the United States is not with us. We're not going to be with them if there's something they want to do in the Pacific, for instance. Let them deal with China. Let America deal with China and the issues there. So we're strong globally, in part because of our friends. We have alliances. We always talk about how the Russians
got a lot
of
good guys and buddies.
Don't have the kinds of friends we have.
We got buddies.
We have friends in part because we stand together. And if we don't stand with our friends, we will lose
strength.
Yeah,
we'd be like Russia.
Come to hurt us.
So you disagree with your colleague, Senator J.D. Vance, who is making the argument that $60 billion more dollars.
You disagree with this guy, the open fascist in your government.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. It just happens to be as accurate as it is irrelevant. All right, it may not change their stance on the battlefield. What it does do is communicate to the entire world.
Oh, come on, don't
we honor our commitments, and we stand with our friends, and we will help freedom fighters around the world who are our friends and allies. And that's a message which is important to the people in Taiwan, to the people in Japan, to the people in India, to the people in Europe. I mean, all these people are watching to see, can you count on America? Or is America so isolationist, it doesn't care what happens to the rest of us? If that's the case, by the way, if we cede leadership, if we're no longer the leader of the free world, if we're no longer the arsenal of democracy, then the world is going to look for different leaders. And I know at least one player that's happy to step into that role, and that's China. And a world where Xi Jinping is the leader of the world is a very dangerous world and not good for America. Not good for
America. So fucking stupid. Like the world would fall behind China. Like, are you fucking dumb? What an idiotic fucking statement that only fucking morons would eat up.
He's got to fearmonger somehow.
That's so dumb.
Businesses for our economy, but certainly not good for our freedom.
It's also pretty amazing to hear you just put it in this simple perspective that if House Republicans block more money to Ukraine, lives will be lost in Ukraine as a result of that.
There's no question about that. Lives will be lost there, and
Already is.
Vladimir Putin will not stop. He may take some time to rebuild his military because it's been decimated by the ill-considered attack on Ukraine, but he will ultimately go after other nations in the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, potentially Poland. Those are possibilities. Georgia. I mean, he will continue. He has indicated he wants to rebuild the Russian Empire, if you will, and those are NATO nations. We're obligated under treaty to come to their defense. We are
Not if Trump leaves.
It would be pound.
Mitt, you didn't think of that, did you, idiot?
Also, no, not obligated. You don't have to.
It should
Trump
be
will
penny
pull
wise
right
and
out.
pound
He'll
foolish.
save us from those
To say we're not going to
obligations.
help Ukraine with weapons.
All right, you know
when
how
the
I
next
sent you
step
that
is a
link?
place where
The it was like it was about the Nazis and the film industry.
Yes.
So like that video,
Mm.
I should pull it up specifically. It was so good because it's so relevant to today about like the isolationists and how they spoke about the Nazis and stuff.
Okay. Bring it up.
It's
we're under treaty, we
Why
would
is
be
it opening in
obligated to help
Facebook?
with not just weapons and funds, but blood. And we need to make sure that the world knows we will stand with Ukraine. I can't guarantee, as JD Vance
this
indicates,
is kind of a
that
small
this is
thing.
going to mean that
hang on.
Ukraine is successful on the
It
battlefield.
says so. The video is Hollywood and the 1941 anti-Nazi film controversy. It's decently small. Obviously, like way bigger than us. Obviously, but this video was so interesting. Like, there's just like obviously they're talking. So they talk about like how this guy right here, this congressman, he gets mad because the movies are woke and political, right? So
Right.
they form a committee to stop these political anti-Nazi movies, like literally deciding with the fascist and isolationism, right?
This is like copy paste what Russia said at the start of their invasion.
Mm-hmm.
They literally said that they were developing weapons in Ukraine biolabs to develop specific bioweapons to target Slavic ethnic groups, even though Ukrainians are also Slavic and would also kill the Ukrainians.
It's also the plot to the newest James Bond movie,
yes,
where James Bond dies.
So it's very funny. Yeah, just China's propaganda is awful, really fucking bad, but their information warfare is really good.
Well, it's what's good is that they keep it internalized.
Yeah,
that's what they protect it. All right. Anyway, this is kind of a quiet video, so
okay.
I'm only showing this little part.
Attacking the committee, where he proclaimed, "If our lives are propaganda, Senator Nye should destroy all the history books just as Hitler made bonfires in Germany." Harry, Jack, Albert, and Sam Warner were all of Polish Jewish descent, and they saw clearly the growing danger of Hitler's Germany. Harry Warner, president of the studio, fearing the worst, worked frantically to get his relatives out of Europe before it was too late. As far as his business was concerned, two events closed the Warner Brothers' dealings with Nazi Germany in 1936. Hitler banned 42nd Street, one of the studio's most profitable films, for being too leggy. And their studio representative, Joe Kaufman, was beaten to death by Nazi thugs in a Berlin back street. Jack Warner told a studio exec, who voiced his objections to making confessions of a Nazi spy, "Listen, these murdering bastards killed our own man in Germany because he wouldn't Heil Hitler. I'm going to finish this picture, and Hitler and Goebbels can scream all they want, and so can guys like you." Harry Warner went before the committee and told them, "You may correctly charge me with being anti-Nazi, but no one can charge me with being anti-American." As for the films in question, he stated, Sergeant York is a factual portrayal of the life of one of the great heroes of the last war. If it is propaganda, we plead guilty. Confessions of a Nazi Spy is a factual portrayal of a Nazi spy ring that actually operated in New York City. If that is propaganda, we plead guilty. He reminded them that Warner Brothers made topical films. That's what they did. They told stories ripped from the headlines
Anti-fascist.
and made motion pictures that confronted the important issues of the day.
Give me 1 more hour with him and I'll have a confession. There'll be no rough stuff. You do things your way. We'll do them ours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just make it the more.
Always.
Then
issues
Harry
that
Warner
happen, the
proceeded to
more
pull
we
out a letter in
understand the
praise of
videos.
Confessions. That
This
read
is
in
the best
part,
part.
"This
I can't
picture
hear
is
you, Paul.
exceedingly good. Anyone
I said this is the best part right here. So the guy who's this so it's like this is the guy pulled out a letter at the committee hearing, and he starts reading the letter.
who truly appreciates our democracy upon this earth will appreciate this picture and feel a new allegiance to the democratic cause." Plot twist, this letter was written by Senator Gerald Nye.
Right.
Next
So
came
the guy who literally took them to the hearings to stop their anti-Nazi films. Literally only a few years ago watched one of their movies and said that it was pure American democracy and patriotism, right?
That's hilarious.
And so it's all about censorship of wokeness, and this
Yeah.
idea of wokeness, but they're doing it in a Nazi way. So yeah, definitely a great video to watch, especially if you care about the history of film. It was very good. Anyway, back to this
And by
idiot.
our friends.
Do you agree with President Zelensky's analysis that
They don't
Trump
obey
doesn't really
gravity.
understand Putin because he's never fought him?
I don't know that I can
Look at
enter into the
TV.
mind
He
of
moved
Donald
to the
Trump,
top of it. How is that
and
possible?
understand his perspectives. I think he shows more respect for Vladimir Putin than Vladimir Putin deserves. Donald Trump has said some strange things like, well, okay, Putin has killed some people, but our president's killed people too. It's like, yeah, but our presidents don't kill their political opponents and members of the media.
Some of them do.
Our presidents take
Clinton.
us to war to protect our freedom. and our
Jackson killed people.
That's very different.
Jackson killed
than
a guy.
murdering
Didn't he beat
political
he
opponents
beat Aaron
and
Burr to
murdering
death
members
or
of the media
something?
and incarcerating journalists. These are the things Vladimir Putin does, and attacking a sovereign nation, Ukraine, without provocation, and killing tens of thousands of people, kidnapping children. This is a very bad guy. Based upon our values, and I think the values that are shared by people throughout the world, and I think it's fine for a president and a former president to talk to leaders of other nations, but be clear-eyed. Vladimir Putin is a very bad person.
Nikki Haley, who is challenging Donald Trump for the Republican nomination, is in your home state today campaigning. She's gotten a lot of support from other top Republicans in your state, but her argument and what she told your constituents today is that if Trump's the Republican nominee, your party is going to lose the election. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. That's a good campaign line, I'm sure. But
so you think he could win?
Oh, sure, I think he can win. I mean, today it's kind of a toss-up. But if the election were actually held today, I think he'd probably win. I can't tell what's going to happen over the next 9 months or so. But
what does it mean if he does win?
Well, a dramatic change in our foreign policy. I think the people around the world say, okay, America is no longer the leader of the free world and the arsenal of democracy. It's not the shining city on a hill. It's now an isolated island. There's some things, by the way, Donald Trump does better than Joe Biden a lot. Joe Biden has made extraordinary mistakes on the immigration front. It's embarrassing how bad he's been.
Yeah, I know you care deeply about the border, and
so he's made it terrible. And Donald Trump did a lot of smart things when he was president. On the foreign policy front, it would be a dramatic departure from our posture over the last 75 or 80 years that, by the way, has not only kept us safe and free from attack, but has also allowed us to build an extraordinarily strong economy and have a...
It's funny. That's something you don't really hear people, or I don't hear people talking about, is the fact that America could be completely open to attack now if nobody else
I think
can
that's
come.
really what needs to be driven home is we need to actually look at countries like Russia and China. And the reason why they don't have power, right? They could be as strong as us, but the main thing that's keeping them back is that they're not forming alliances, right? So when Trump says they don't pay their fair share, what he's saying is we should be more like Russia and just take things.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And we need to really get that idea ingrained for people to realize that's what we're talking about here. Is that like the economy is protected because of this. We like if you think your price of groceries is bad now,
wait until you're an isolated fucking
just
shit
wait
show.
until America withdraws from NATO.
Look at these little foots.
Who's gonna fucking coordinate and control
foots.
and trade? You
Look
know,
at these little foots. Grab it on. Yep. See you later.
Income per person
What a
in
funny
America
creature.
about a third higher than people in Europe.
But can I just ask? I think that those comments there may raise some questions for people watching at home. Would you vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden?
No, absolutely not. I mean, for me,
Yeah,
there are
that's funny.
two factors in deciding who I want to have as the leader of my country and the person who is the example of the president for my kids and my grandkids. One is their position and policies. And on foreign policy, I'm not aligned with Donald Trump, at least as I understand his policy. On domestic policy, yeah, I align with many of his domestic policies. But there's another dimension besides policy, and that's character. And I think what America is as a nation, what has allowed us to be the most powerful
he likes
nation
that
on
Donald
earth
Trump
and the leader
has had
of the
multiple
earth
wives.
is the character.
Mitt Romney does.
Yeah, it's a Mormon thing. It's a Mormon
That's
joke,
hilarious.
right? You know, what I really like is that he has multiple wives. Yeah, but not he divorced most of them. You know, it's like
He's horny thinking about
it's like
that.
yeah,
He's
but they could have been all
can't
together.
wait
You
for
know,
this
that's the
Yeah.
values that I support is polygamy.
All right. We are only
We
watching
watched
the
this
interview.
already. This is the same interview we already watched. I
is
deleted
it?
it from the list, but it didn't
Okay.
update for you.
Let me refresh.
This is all
streams.
Trump stuff, though. It's Trump time.
Yeah.
And this breaking news,
They don't
while we
obey
were showing
gravity.
you that, we now have an update on former President Trump's appeal against his New York civil fraud verdict. A New York appellate judge has rejected the former president's request to put a pause on the $454 million civil fraud penalty. But the former president did
Look, that's his
win
butt.
his request to temporarily delay rulings that banned him from running a business in New York State and taking out loans from New York
Interesting.
banks. With that, we bring in Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney and Fox News contributor. Jonathan, a bit of a split decision there for the former president. His attorneys pushed this delay on the grounds that this amount is so enormous that it is exorbitant and punitive, were their words. What do you think about this decision?
Well, it does give him a little breathing room. It still leaves him with a rather onerous burden. But the decision of the lower court, in my view, was unfair. You know, the judge
Oh my God.
imposed an unprecedented penalty under this law for this type of conduct. In fact, none of us have seen this law applied in this way. And by doing so, he not only hit Trump with this massive award, but required Trump to put the money up front under a separate rule, which
good.
requires you
Fuck
to
him.
deposit money or to get a bond. And then Trump was hit with a 30-day deadline to do so. And then
My guy, he's a billionaire. Fuck him.
on top of that, he was unable to do business with some of the New York banks. Most of us felt that was really beyond the pale. I mean, at some point, it becomes confiscatory just in order to bring an appeal. And you know, the example is that if you're contesting an order taking your home, you shouldn't have to sell your home to appeal that order. But people like Attorney General James were talking about precisely that. She was actually naming properties that she might seize or he might sell just to get the Court of Appeals to look at this opinion. So it is a mixed victory for Trump.
He's a billionaire.
But it does give him some more options he didn't have before.
She is very
Oh, Mr. Trump with multiple dozens of properties. He's gonna have to sell some of his properties. Oh, boo. Shut the fuck up. Who gives a fuck? Fuck him. Billionaire. He can afford it.
gleeful about the situation that he's in right now. She said, you know, I look up at 60 Wall Street every single day. Basically, if he just sells that, he could solve this problem.
You know how you could have avoided this? Just not being a cunt. It's pretty simple.
She's also putting on her X account every day the newly accrued amount, including the new interest that happens daily.
You are garbage.
This amount.
Okay,
Does
you're
he
garbage.
have any further recourse on this amount, in your opinion, which I think is due in a couple of weeks now?
He doesn't come out. He's like
Yeah,
a
it's
ship
very
in a bottle.
hard
You
in
know?
order to get a further review. He can ask for it. I do think that he
doesn't
has
obey
very good
gravity.
grounds here to say that this was an excessive award, but also the conditions for appeal are beginning to shock the conscience, or at least they should. So
I need
I
to
think
wash
he
my
can
hands.
push
I've done-
further, but he's unlikely to succeed with the Court of
Yeah,
Appeals.
it's extraordinary. The largest single judgment against any individual, I believe, in American history in this decision here.
The chair will
against
advise
former
that the rules do
president,
care.
and it's a victimless crime, as they have admitted in this court. But they came up with an exorbitant judgment, in his opinion. Thank you very much,
But
John.
he will be able to get that appeal. That's the key.
We are just 4 days away from Super Tuesday, when GOP voters in 15 states will pick a nominee. The last person standing in the race against Donald Trump is Nikki Haley. She hasn't won a contest yet, but today she announced she raised $12 million in February. Joining me now is Governor Haley. Thank you so much. It's great to see you in studio. I want to start with what's happening with Donald Trump today. He's back in Florida for one of the federal cases against him. Meanwhile, another, the January 6th case, the Supreme Court announced this week that it would hear arguments in April about whether or not he will get his push for immunity. So this means that there's a very good chance that the trial, if it does go forward, won't happen until either right before or even during, or maybe even after the election. Should the Supreme Court expedite this?
Well, I think the Supreme Court should hear it, because we do want to look at immunity. No president should ever be above the law. And, you know, we've never really had to clarify this before. And I think it's important for the Supreme Court to clarify.
That's true.
You know, would we like to see things go faster? Of course we would. But do you think the judges and the lawyers are going to have that happen? I don't know. I mean, it could be that
Why
it
would
takes
they?
a while.
They're
But I'm just glad that they're hearing it. I think that's important.
Is it important
Money,
for
money,
voters
money, money, money,
to know
money.
how this trial and others wrap up before they go to the polls?
Of course. Of course. I mean,
They want it to go on as
you want
long.
people to have as much information about the people they're deciding will be
Liz,
president
anyway.
before they go to the polls. You know, that's the part that, you know, we all should hope to have. I don't know that we'll have that clarity, but I think that that's something that voters would want.
Let's turn to abortion, because I want you to hear what the former president
But
said
I'm trying to
last night
figure
about
out
this issue.
how we get them to have Pokemon go to the
More and more
polls.
I'm hearing about 15 weeks, and I haven't decided yet. The number 15 is mentioned. I haven't agreed to any number.
Oh
I'm
my
gonna
God, there's
see.
dust all
We
over
wanna
me.
take an issue that was
Govern
very
me
serious
harder, Daddy.
and get it settled and solved so everybody can be happy.
Now, you've said repeatedly that you don't think a federal abortion ban is possible because of where the votes are. But should it be GOP policy? And what are your thoughts on what he said?
I mean, look, you can put a number on it, but I think that's the problem. That's the problem, because all that does is divide people. It demonizes the issue. It gets people's backs up. That's the wrong way to look at how do you save as many babies as possible and support as many moms as possible. The only thing we should be talking about is consensus. Is what can 60 members of the Senate agree on?
Is that 15 weeks?
I don't think it's 15 weeks. If it was, you'd have it now. You don't have it now. And so that's the part, is why talk about a number? Instead, get the senators in a room and say, okay, where does 60 agree? That's the way we need to do it. In order to find that consensus, the focus needs to be banning late-term abortions, encouraging
they don't
adoptions,
happen.
making sure doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them, having contraception be accessible,
That
and
I'm
making sure
less
no state law says to a woman
opposed to.
who's had an abortion that she's going to jail or getting the death penalty. Just start there. The fellas just don't know how to talk about this.
The fellas.
They've got to humanize this issue and stop demonizing it. This isn't about a number.
The
This
fellas.
is about babies
The
and
fellas.
women and a personal situation that they are in. And it should be handled with that kind of respect, not just throwing out numbers and then expecting people to choose.
I want to switch a little bit, actually a lot, to the issue of IVF. Earlier this week, Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi blocked a bill that would have enshrined federal protections for IVF and doctors who perform those procedures. Do you think there should be federal protections for IVF?
I think we want IVF to be as accessible as possible to parents who are wanting those blessings of having a baby. I don't know the details of any of the bills, so I can't weigh into that. But what I can tell you is we don't want to take that away from parents who desperately want to have a child.
Wow, what a
Michael
radical
and I got our
position.
children from fertility processes. We need to make sure that those are available, that they're protected, that it's personal, and that the whole situation is dealt with respect.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I mean, you say that you support IVF. I think at this point, most people are saying they support IVF. The question is, as policy, given the fact that it is under fire in places like Alabama, should there be a federal
Only
protection,
Alabama.
or do you think it should be left to the states?
Well, I think there should be federal protection that we allow for IVF places to be able to function. I think that the people need to decide if they want to get into the details of it or not. That's, it's the same thing of, do they want to decide, exactly how many embryos or anything like that?
It's also like what Zaps was doing, because he likes to pull everything back. He's trying to burrow the way down into his cage, so he'll open up a hole later for Bishi to bite him, right? And so I was fixing it, so I was covering it up to make sure it was like a puzzle for him to solve to even get at the place to chew. And he kept trying to be friendly and was excited and running around. So I went to try to pick him up, and he just he did the classic run away and went, "Ma'am," but then he turned around and stood in his back legs and and Caitlin's view was like,
He's talking back at you.
Before. Dude, it was so funny. He was so mad at me.
Hope they don't get into that. I want to see that decision between the parents and the doctors. But I think the only thing that the federal government should do is make sure that IVF places are protected and available,
And not get into the whole question of whether an embryo is a life.
We don't need government getting involved in an issue where we don't have a problem. We don't have a problem with IVF facilities.
There's no problem with abortion either.
Yeah, let's move on. Who cares?
Former President Trump
has
been kicked off another state's
just
ballot.
Have to catch up on.
Yeah.
Right.
3 days.
Obviously
This time it's in Illinois.
This has to do with the court ruling. So just headline here. Go to the next one.
Late
story.
And the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed, meanwhile, to rule on whether Trump has immunity in Jack Smith's election interference case.
Great.
We want to go back to our coverage over President Biden and former President Donald Trump's visits to the border. They both agree that the situation there needs to change, but their plans to reach that goal are very different. Definitely want to bring back Camilo Montoya Galvez from Del Rio, Texas right now. Camilo, thank you for talking about this, because a huge issue we know for voters here. Talk about the differences in the messaging between President Biden and former President Donald Trump regarding the border issue, and how
Navalny's
is this being
still in
received
top
by potential
stories
voters
for
in
global.
Texas.
What the fuck?
Right?
Insane.
Who are you, the Queen of fucking England?
Good
now?
morning, Jared. The U.S.-Mexico border, as you know, has long been at the center of this national debate over
He's less
immigration,
racist than her.
but it is also now front and center in the 2024 campaign for President Biden and former President Donald Trump came to the Texas border yesterday to essentially blame each other, Jared, for the country's intractable immigration problems and crises that have bedeviled Republican and Democratic presidents over the past 3 decades. In Eagle Pass, Texas, former President Donald Trump blamed President Biden for the record levels of illegal crossings here along the border over the past 3 years. He cited recent crimes committed by undocumented immigrants and called the situation here an invasion. We do have to underscore, of course, that there's no military offensive here, and the data that is available on this issue does not indicate that migrants are committing crimes at a higher rate than native-born Americans and U.S. citizens.
Right. All right. Next.
On Wednesday, Illinois Judge Grace ruled that Donald.
Okay, we don't need this.
Last year, almost
All this.
half of. Hello, North Dakota, and a very special thanks to North Dakota Republican Party Chair Sandy Sanford, and of course,
your fantastic governor, Doug
Sandy.
Burgum.
This is all
And
he has
thank
to do
to U.S.
to
Senators
campaign. This is
John
all he has to
Hoeven
do.
and
Yeah.
Steve Kramer, along with
No, they're like, how
Congressman
does he
Kelly
lose? It's like, it
Armstrong.
doesn't matter
Above all, I
how
want to
much
thank
you
so many
personally like
incredible
him.
rank and file
Okay?
Republicans for
Like,
coming
he
out
might
for these
have more
very
people
important
who
caucuses.
are in love with him than other politicians. That doesn't make him win. It's not the amount
Yeah.
of people who love you. It's the amount of people who like you.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, you're going to send a big signal to the entire world that this is your country and it's also Trump country.
I
We're
think
gonna
it's
work
more
with this
than that.
together. We're going to make this so
I
great.
think
We're gonna make
I think there's a real agenda here as well, because like it's an anti-Putin agenda. I'm just being fair here. So anyone, like, I'm very clear, fundraising for Ukraine and stuff, but I'm still going to be as objective as possible. That they like refuse to acknowledge what he actually is and just want to frame him as somebody that's like, Russia is our enemy, right? They're so bad that they kill their political dissidents, right? They kill their opposition. They don't just jail them like these other dictatorships. They kill them, right? Which is true. Obviously, fucking Putin killed him. It's just the way that they want to keep on it and like focus so hard on it, like it's the only like political like opposition that's been killed. Sure, it's Russia, it's big, right? But like it's just weird to me. It seems more of like an agenda type thing to make Russia look worse, which is like I would maybe focus a little bit more on their war crimes and shit,
Yeah.
and show what they do.
Yeah, especially Bucha.
Mm-hmm.
make our country better than ever before. And you're going to send a message straight
Make our
to
country
crooked
gay.
Joe Biden that we are coming like a freight train this November 5th. With your vote,
The freight
we are
train
going to
going
tell
to the
Crooked Joe
concentration
Biden,
camp. We're sending
"No,
we're
you're
sending them by
fired.
freight.
You were
We're
a
sending
terrible
them by
president,
freight
and
over
you
the
are
border to the
fired."
camps, and
This is
then
the
we'll
most
put them in the
important
showers.
election in American history under Crooked Joe. Our country is being destroyed. Our
I
economy is
put my
being
blue tie
wrecked
on
by
today.
Biden's inflation disaster. Our borders are being overrun. We're being invaded. Our values are under attack. Men are invading women's sports. America is being weakened and humiliated in the world stage. And Crooked Joe Biden is stumbling to the brink of World War III. Our country, in other words, is a mess. But we are not going to let this disaster continue. 3 years ago, we were a great nation, and we will soon be a great nation again. With your vote, we are going to once again fight for the American worker and American
Be
farmer
scared. Vote
No,
for me.
like no
you know
one
how
has
they-
ever
look,
fought before.
This is what they say. They say they always want to act like this is the most important election of your lives, right?
Yeah.
Well, normally this is the type of shit they're normally doing, but now it's just like, have you seen how bad Trump actually is, right? It's
Yeah.
always fear that if they get elected, this is what's going to happen. But like with Trump, it's something else. Like he's giving me normal politician vibes.
Stop Joe Biden's inflation disaster. We will cut your taxes and cut your regulations. We will defend our great miners, and we will unleash American energy and
What do you
liberty
mean?
like never
Hang
ever
on.
before.
Does
We
he
will
mean
secure our
he means coal miners, right?
I think so.
border. We will stand up for our values. We will reclaim our freedom, and we will restore peace through strength. Just like we had it 4 years ago, we had the greatest country ever.
There you go, like you
and
like it.
now our country is a laughing stock all over the world.
Is
we are
it?
not going to let that continue, not for a minute. Thank you once again for coming out today. I would truly be honored to have your vote. Together, we're going to defeat Crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of our country,
Actually,
and make America great
statistically,
again.
it's now you. It's been decided by
Yeah.
scholars. So
It's about focusing and preparing and being effective in November. There's not a philosophical divide or, an issue divide on those types of things. This is purely on getting the party ready to win in November.
I have voted for him like Tim said, every single time. The minute he came down the escalator with Melania and started talking
Oh my
about
God.
securing our border, it was
They look like
this
little
man makes sense.
Christmas
you
tree
know?
shoppers.
These people are awful.
Everything that he says makes sense.
Yeah, it was a little lonely. It was more of a stark contrast than I thought it was going to be. I
Haley
thought there would be
supporter.
a couple of others. I didn't like the way that Trump handled himself after the last election.
Why are you
and
gay?
really, that's the whole of it. I think that there's a
You're a
level of
Democrat, bro.
professionalism that should be expected from a former president or a sitting president, and I don't think he showed it after the last election cycle. And if he's on the ballot in the fall, I'll probably still vote for him because I believe in conservative values, and I think that I agree with most of his values more than I would agree with President Biden.
Weird. Same video.
What?
We knocked out ISIS. We took ISIS. We knocked them out. We got them out. We got them out. And take your time. Take your time. We have a great person up here. You just take your time. Plenty of time. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's great. These people do such a great job. Thank you. You doing okay? He looks good. He looks good to me, I'll tell you. His hands up. Thank you, man. Thank you. Don't forget, they wait for 4 days outside. And then they get in here and they say, gee, Trump's really no good. This is not worth it. And they don't feel so good. But he's
What the
great.
fuck?
Thank you.
He's having a heart attack, bro.
That's so weird.
You take your time. You're more important right now than all of us. He's got a Trump. He's pointing to his hat. You better believe it. Yep. America.
Yeah, he's like, oh yeah, you're mocking me, but I'm a supporter of you, you fucking idiot. But he cares about you, obviously.
He's giving him the time.
Dude, he's so mad that he isn't able to speak right now.
You can tell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know that
he's pointing
Ron
to his hat.
DeSantis-
Yeah, America.
You know that like Ron DeSantis molding when his wife is speaking?
Yeah.
That's
Well, it's
what's
the
happening.
Adderall that he's on. It's him grinding his teeth because he's on so much speed.
You know, these people, the doctors, the medics, first responders, they're incredible people. They're incredible people. They do such a job.
They do such a job.
What a statement.
You all saw the guy yesterday on the crane coming in and saved the truck. Did you see that? The truck went over the bridge and they dropped the boom in the crane and they saved the driver of the truck who was hanging
You see the guy on the crane? He saved
perilously
the
over
truck.
the bridge. It was a tough thing. Unbelievable, right? It was an unbelievable job they do. Unbelievable.
Fuck me.
So just waiting for him to be like, you gonna take all day here, guy, or what?
Because everybody in this room is so important.
He doesn't
You know
fucking
that, right?
stop.
There's a lot of people in here, by the way. That's a big crowd. You couldn't get. They have 2,000 people outside. We have 2,000 people outside. There's a lot of people. They couldn't get them in.
Rig to rig.
That's great. Thank you. You're not going to miss much. Don't worry about it. Thank you, man. You take care of yourself, all right? It's great.
Weird. Speak of the devil.
Let's jump into the articles.
Oh.
Donald Trump is now officially the worst U.S. president in history.
I was like, oh,
according to
another guy
scholars.
with a VTuber girl cat thing.
This comes just from
okay?
Guardian, but we're going to dive into the actual data
Bizarre.
as well.
Bizarre.
Worse than
Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, I was about to say worse than Trail of Tears Jackson.
Yeah,
Bizarre, right?
So Jackson still ranks
Yeah.
pretty high up
Isn't that
there.
like
Like
a
he
Nazi
did drop
thing?
a bit, but it's just
I don't know. I don't know. I just was like, oh my god, these guys.
The people who did this ranking were probably like they're scholars, so they're probably looking at it with like, well, for his time, yes, that was still atrocious.
Guess so.
But like, yeah, so they were probably trying to do some of that.
I don't know.
But also,
it's weird to me. Like I always play like, like FemShep is canon, right?
Mhm.
But I just the VTuber thing.
Yeah.
To be a cat girl. I don't know. Maybe the person is they just sound, maybe I'm judging because they sound male. I don't know, bro.
I don't know.
Maybe I'm not woke enough.
It's just them going through the list.
Yeah, I just really wanted to look at this though, because it was just very strange to me when I came across it.
Well, we'll just find the map because we don't really give a fuck about the rest.
The Statsos.
Yeah.
Yes. But if you go down to the bottom, very bottom, Donald Trump, he got a score of 10.9, which is 6 points below Buchanan,
who's responsible for the Civil War.
Was Buchanan the guy? Was Buchanan before or after the Civil War?
He was responsible for it.
Let's see here. James Buchanan.
Yeah, Buchanan was leading up to it, wasn't he? So like
he's the 15th president.
So I think
he was from
he left the
1857 to 1861.
Yes. He caused the Civil War.
1861.
Okay.
Versus.
Yeah, so if I recall correctly, Buchanan and Pierce were the pre-Civil War presidents who basically were all like, we can't free the slaves. That would be a horrible thing to do. That would be really bad.
Okay, let's move on. That's wild, right?
So, no, we ain't going to do that.
Yeah.
Putting Trump below the guy who caused the Civil War.
Confidant is expected to plead guilty to perjury. Alan Weisselberg arrived at the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse a little earlier on Monday.
Wow, weird how everyone around him is guilty, but not him, right?
No, of course.
He gave during the civil investigation into the Trump Organization's finances. Weisselberg had been the company's chief financial officer. In 2022, he pleaded guilty to 15 counts of tax fraud and served about 100 days in jail. Let's bring in CNN's Kara Scannell, who joins us from New York. Kara, of course, this is a case you've been following very closely. Remind us just of
tax fraud
who
is epic.
Alan Weisselberg is. He does have a long history with the Trump Organization.
Rahel, Alan Weisselberg has been with the Trump Organization for
I don't care. Perjury charges, great.
Yeah.
Donald Trump and his wife, I don't know the name of my wife. He was referring to the fact that at CPAC, they had a sold-out speech, the biggest audience they've had in years, I think maybe ever. I made the statement that Melania was very popular.
What the fuck are we watching,
when I mentioned her name,
I'm just pointing out, like,
went,
these are like clearly like I'm the purple cat in this scenario, right? I'm just pointing out these are worse versions of us, and they're doing better.
Wild. I then looked at the two people, man and wife, Matt and Mercedes Schlapp, and I said, wow, they really like the first lady. So this got taken as the fact that I thought Mercedes was the first lady. It has nothing to do with that. These people are really dishonest. They are
Not
absolutely
me, I
something.
never lie.
They have a horrible candidate who's a horrible president. They make up things constantly. You take a look at when I use Barack Hussein Obama and I interject him into where it's supposed to be Biden, and I do it purposely for comedic reasons and for sarcasm.
Right.
Welcome to What Was That? I'm Gabe Sanchez. Donald Trump.
What was that? I don't care.
TYT. Who's doing this?
Yeah, I don't get
That's the Jesse Waters. Yeah, that was the Jesse Waters thing we already
for President Trump. Alina Habba joins me now. Alina, are you going to send Keith Olbermann some of those new Trump sneakers?
Midas Touch.
Yes.
Dude, they're fucking awful.
I know, right? But that
They're
opening clip
so
was so
bad.
funny.
Yeah.
No, I'm the anime girl, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm going to put them in a case so he can look at them forever and look at eBay and how they're selling for $450,000.
What's going on with these people? It's just a crazy reaction to something everybody knew was going to happen.
You know what it reminds me of, Jesse? Do you remember in 2016 and 2020?
The unanimous ruling is kind
What
of
do you mean? Oh, did we not expect? Oh, people are just going to sleep and not react?
Yeah. Like, of course people were going to react.
Whoa,
What
crazy. You
are
mean there was a
talking about?
Supreme Court ruling on whether or not the populist candidate for the Republican Party can run and we're not going to report on it? Why are people freaking out about this?
Memes now of them crying when Donald Trump won. Just the outbreak. I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and watching liberals just shed liberal tears.
They're still crying about lib tears, bro.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's very
God.
funny.
Like, I watch Trump and I'm like,
happened.
okay, I get it. I see why people fall for this shit. Like that North Dakota shit. I was like, okay, I see why people fall for this shit. And then I watched this and they're like, yeah, remember like 200 years ago when the liberal cried? The one time.
Why? Because America won today. Imagine crying because the Constitution is standing strong and we're not going to turn into Cuba. That's Trump derangement syndrome 101 right there. We're so upset because the Constitution was upheld today because the Supreme Court showed us that we are not Cuba.
Oh, it definitely does. The libs have it hard.
No, but I'm saying like compared to these people.
Yeah.
Like if anyone has a derangement syndrome, but they always draw buff and muscular. You know, nobody does that with Biden.
That is true.
Country. We are not a banana republic, and that the things I've seen over the past 4 months in New York are not going to become America. And what does MSNBC, The View, and CNN do? They have tantrums. It's literally epic to watch.
Oh wow, the attorney for
bro,
Trump.
hang on. We need to. Sorry to interrupt you. She just said literally epic, and I need to go back to hear her say that. I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
When CNN do, they have tantrums. It's literally epic to watch. But we did say this is a clean-cut Supreme Court.
Like, do we really expect a Trump's attorney to not kiss his ass?
Do you expect her to say it's literally epic?
Yeah, kind of. A little bit. But like, she's quite literally Trump's attorney. Like, of course she's going to be on here.
She's literally
sucking his dick.
Biden derangement syndrome is real.
They're both real. They're both fucking real.
It's nothing compared to the K Hive. That's the weirdest one.
Breaking news this hour, we are awaiting former President Donald Trump. He's expected to speak at any minute. And you see, this is Mar-a-Lago on the bottom of your screen.
Right.
That's where we expect to see the former president. And obviously, that's the U.S. Supreme Court in the top box to the right there. The Supreme Court's huge, unanimous decision today.
Unanimous is fucking wild.
Like I said, I think it's because they're going to look at it as not a living document.
Colorado's decision to ban Donald Trump from its primary ballot. All 9 justices ruled in favor of Trump in this case, which will impact the status of efforts in several other states to remove Trump from their respective ballots. For instance, we know in Illinois and Maine, they were already planning to do that too. So all of this ahead of Super Tuesday, which is tomorrow. This ruling is huge. And we've already heard from his camp. It's a big win for America.
If that was the case, wouldn't it open up challenges to the Constitution as itself? In and of itself?
The other thing that might happen is that
answer the fucking question.
It will. This case was different than the rest, right? So this was like the election committee or something.
Okay.
The Colorado one. The other ones were like judges. Right.
Right.
So it might be that they ruled that this person doesn't have the authority to do this.
Okay.
As
Interesting.
well. That could be another thing that they do.
Okay, because I was yes,
I was literally thinking how they could challenge gun control on this type of living document shit.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Eating,
yeah.
I was thinking that.
That's exactly the same thoughts that were going through my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, can't they just challenge the entire Constitution?
We'll see. I didn't look.
Yeah.
So.
This is outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner here with you today.
In real time.
My co-host Kayleigh McEnany and Emily Compagno, also television host and author Kim Douglas, and Fox and Friends first co-host Todd Pyro. All right.
Oh, the token
Tom, I'm
male.
gonna start with you. Just first of all, the legalities of this, spell them out, and
Yeah,
how
her
much
or
of a
Candace
victory
Owens
is this for Trump?
It is a tremendous victory.
Her.
In our coverage starting at 10 o'clock this morning, one point was made over and over. This is not just a decision that applies to Colorado. This does apply to all the other states that are going to try this. Whether it was Turley, whether it was McCarthy, or whether it was Shannon Breed, that point was made over and over again. But why the underlying decision is so important for our country? Instinctually, everybody on this couch knew that what Colorado was trying to do was fundamentally wrong from a democracy perspective. We cannot have some random state bureaucrat decide because they
that's
have
what it is.
an animus against Donald Trump.
So
that the
it was
rest
a
of the
bureaucrat.
What if they did a referendum and got everybody in the state to say whether they wanted him on or off the ballot, and it came back as they wanted him off?
That I think some people have proposed that,
Mm.
but this is what I'm saying is that the other ones were different than this because they were actually like judges and stuff. So
Okay.
so they're trying to frame it as like Trump is going to win and get back on all these ballots. That's not necessarily what we're seeing so far.
Yeah.
The way they're framing it, it's trying to seem like that, but it's just none of you random state bureaucrats can do this. It has to be a court that decides.
Country,
which I kind of agree
put him
with.
in office as president if they so choose. And the 9-0 decision made that abundantly clear. Those justices, the liberal ones, certainly don't like Donald Trump, but the decision here had to be 9-0 for the sake of, wait for it, Harris, democracy.
Well, and you know, Emily, one thing that Jonathan Turley and Andrew Trzaskowski, who was also with me last hour, we were all talking about is that we are one voice coming from the U.S. Supreme Court.
So you mean
and
to
we
tell
are
me
not all one voice
you
in the
mean
United
to tell me that the system's not rigged against Trump now? And
Yeah.
we actually so are we a banana republic or not at this point?
They're confused.
States of America right now. We're divided. They showed us what unity looks like around a purpose and a mission.
Yeah, you know what I love about this opinion, which I have in my hand right here, is how clear it is. Anyone can read this opinion and understand exactly the logic behind
read the
Supreme
fucking
Court's
opinion then.
unanimous ruling. And to your point, what we all expected, because this is exactly what the Constitution stands for. And what I love the most as well, their opening line as they come out, because the Constitution makes Congress, rather than the states, responsible for enforcing Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates. We reverse. And they go on to explain that the 14th Amendment expanded federal power at the expense of state autonomy. So this entire decision is essentially saying, look, at the end of the day, you are trying to apply something in Section 3 within the 14th Amendment to give states a little bit more power. But nay, that is from Congress. And ultimately, they say, because of the people. And we talked about a lot that the fear, the tragedy that might happen if they ruled in a different way. And it was the patchwork application. Remember, it was the fact that why can Colorado have an impact on what people in South Carolina decide? That the reason or the reasoning is absolutely not they can't, that at the end of the day, the patchwork that would likely result from state enforcement would sever the direct link that the framers found so critical between the national government and the people of the United States as a whole. Nothing in the Constitution, they say, requires that we endure such chaos, arriving at any time or different times up to and perhaps beyond the inauguration.
Well, we've seen a lot of chaos.
Interesting.
And part of the problem has been
let's
people
move on
have,
from that.
you know, continued.
Let's see some unhinged stuff.
Well, thank you for having me on. First and foremost, I'm glad that
That's still.
Oh, this is the lady who banned him.
Oh.
they issued a decision. Colorado voters and American voters all across the country deserve to know whether Donald Trump is qualified or not as we go into Super Tuesday. But in terms of the bigger decision, I'm disappointed. We believe that it's up to Colorado or any state to determine whether to disqualify oath-breaking insurrectionists from our ballots. Ultimately, the United States Supreme Court disagreed. Votes for Donald Trump will count, and he is on our ballot. I wouldn't say I was surprised they didn't address it, but it is the big elephant in the room. Only 2 courts have looked at the question of whether Trump engaged in insurrection, and they both determined that he did.
Okay, I don't care anymore.
And I think one of the
Getting through it.
the
Got a lot to do.
concerns
Got a
from
lot
this
to do.
decision
Former President Donald Trump is in a Florida courtroom right now, waiting to hear more about when his classified documents trial will begin. And in about an hour, a judge in the Georgia case will hear final arguments in the misconduct hearing of District Attorney Fani Willis and her, as I call him, prosecutorial paramour, Nathan Wade. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner on this fine Friday, along with my co-host Kayleigh McEnany and Emily Campagno.
Hi, Kayleigh.
Also joining us, Director of the Tech
She stole
Policy
Kayleigh's
Center
cross.
at the Heritage Foundation, Tara Frederick, and host
Cringe.
of Making Money on Fox Business, Charles Payne. He's making money as he sits here. The number of legal challenges against Trump raising some questions now about whether they are political stunts to keep him from a second term or anything else. Trump is in the Florida courtroom that I mentioned right now, learning about when his classified documents trial will begin, and the timing, as you know, would be key. The judge could push the trial until after the November presidential election, and that could ignite outrage from the left, as did the decision for the U.S. Supreme Court to take up Trump's immunity case. That just happened. And today, we'll hear the final arguments in a hearing that will determine whether District Attorney Fani Willis should be disqualified from handling the election interference case against Trump because of her romantic relationship with the prosecutor she hired, Nathan Wade. I wasn't kidding. He was married, prosecutorial paramour. Charles Payne, your top line.
Okay, moving on.
Listen, there's so many indictments. So
did we click this one? I wanted to look at. Yeah, it's let me see. Let me check real quick. Let me see if this is funny. Okay, this was the one. Okay, that we were just looking at. I wanted to see the media meltdown.
This one?
The one we were just on, where it's like the media meltdown. Okay, here we go. It's Rachel. Now they have it. I found it. I'm gonna go to this section.
Okay, you just screen share it then.
Yeah. We'll see how this looks. See there. Let's see the meltdown that they advertised with that.
They've thrown a monkey wrench into the schedule.
They take so long in making that decision that they are giving de facto immunity.
It is frustrating to me that the idea that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be delaying this trial for a couple of months.
The cravenness of the court is evident in what they are doing with the pacing here, right? Like putting this off for 7 weeks, sitting on it for 2 weeks for no reason.
Is this melting down?
Pushing all of the cases that they can pushing them to the point where Trump will be standing for election before any of us have heard the verdicts in any of those cases. Got it. It's the timing.
Obviously, we can't put all of our hopes in the Supreme Court. The people need to be engaged and aroused at this point.
So being engaged and aroused against the Supreme Court.
Melting down. That was the meltdown. Rach, that was how calm Maddow was? Okay.
That's a meltdown. Yeah, all right. Cool.
That's the worst they could get on people stating how obvious it is that what the Supreme Court's doing. It's pathetic, honestly.
Crazy.
Today that Colorado must allow Donald Trump to be on the presidential ballot, but there was some disagreement on how far that ruling should stretch. 5 of the conservative justices wrote that no state can ever remove any federal officer from a ballot. The 3 liberal-leaning justices disagreeing wrote, quote, "The majority announces that a disqualification for insurrection can occur only when Congress enacts a particular kind of legislation pursuant to Section 5 of the 14th Amendment. In doing so, the majority shuts the door on other potential means of federal enforcement. The majority attempts to insulate all alleged insurrectionists from future challenges to their holding
I'm confused
federal
what that means.
office." That is very legalese, but it is a
thank God a guy to explain
the
it.
Majority of doing insulating and protecting insurrectionists. Joining us now, retired conservative federal judge J. Michael Ludig. Judge Ludig, you predicted that the Supreme Court would affirm Colorado's decision to remove Trump from the ballot, calling Colorado's decision unassailable in every single respect under the Constitution, unquote. I guess the justices didn't see it your way. What's your reaction?
Today's ruling, Jake, was both astonishing and unprecedented, not for its decision of the exceedingly narrow question presented by the case, though that issue was important, but rather for its decision to reach and decide a myriad of the other constitutional
Holy shit, he
issues,
used it correctly.
surrounding disqualification under 14th Amendment. In reaching and deciding those questions unnecessarily, the court, the majority, as the concurrences said, effectively decided
God, this guy
that
talks.
the former president.
You're boring.
Hi, everyone. We have some major breaking news. We just wrapped our
Finally.
show, and of course, we received the big news of the day. The
Real
Supreme Court has
journalist
now ruled
analysis.
9-0 to reject the Colorado Supreme Court decision that would have held Donald J. Trump off of the ballot in that state. The Colorado Supreme Court affirming a Colorado Secretary of State decision ruling that Donald Trump was not allowed on the ballot because he had violated the 14th Amendment in their estimation. The 9-0 decision is a bit complicated, Crystal, and we can break it down for everyone. Let's put it up there on the screen. While they unanimously agree that the Colorado Supreme Court went too far and the Colorado Secretary of State in their disqualification of Donald Trump on the ballot, the majority opinion, which includes 6 out of the 9 justices, effectively says that this was overstepping the role of Congress, that Congress, through its enumeration of the 14th Amendment, not only had to have that stand, but would have to pass a piece of legislation that specifically lays out which individuals and how were to be disqualified from office under the 14th Amendment. 3 of the liberal justices, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Sotomayor, and Justice Elena Kagan, dissented from that majority opinion, but found with the 9-0 unanimous decision that Colorado had gone beyond the terms of the 14th Amendment. So basically, the majority opinion and where this justification now comes down is Colorado went too far, and in the future, that Congress itself must pass specifically which types of individuals, why and how are disqualified from the ballot, and that the hodgepodge nature of allowing secretaries of state like Maine or Colorado and others could not stand. That's what they all unanimously found. So very impactful case, probably the most significant one since Bush versus Gore in terms of that decision, but this one a little bit different in its finding. For its number.
It wasn't surprising the direction that this went in.
Thanks, Crystal.
To emphasize one of the things you're saying there, that piece about the majority ruled that Congress basically has to pass a law in order for this section of the Constitution to apply. My recollection from when I was researching this previously is that would mean that this provision is not self-executing. Some parts of the Constitution just they are what they are, and they are, you know, available for enforcement as they are, and others actually require an act of Congress. That's what the majority is saying. That's the piece that a minority of the liberal justices are saying, hey, we don't agree with that part. That part goes further than we need to in this decision. Just as a reminder, I want to read to people the text of Amendment 14, Section 3, just so we have a recollection.
Do we need to do this? All right. Are we done with it? We got enough on the Supreme Court? I think we're done.
And then I was curious, we can after Haiti, I was going to say after Haiti, we can save the rest for the next show. Like we can do world politics on the next show.
Yeah,
and open with that, and then so we can do Haiti and then something more silly and fun.
Okay, and we'll finish on that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of a CIA psychological profile about you, sir? Would you be interested in hearing what the CIA had to say? This secret study portrays as a brilliant but dangerous megalomaniac who is likely to pursue his own aims in disregard of U.S. interests. He's an uncertain ally. Shall I go on, or would you prefer that I stop, sir?